Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence, we go up to all sides because there's more than one side of the story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here. How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on, it's gonna be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, April the 17th, 2024, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan. How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. Before we get started, guys, let you know that we are a news podcast, which means that we only take news from the most reputable sources from award-winning journalism. We do not do sensational news like Fox News, The Blaze, The Daily Beast, or whatever extreme left or extreme right publications. We simply do not do them because we only want to give you the facts, just the facts, nothing more. At the same time, guys, we do try to watch our language, but sometimes words do fly. At the same time, there may be videos that may be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, how do we actually start this? Because I really do believe in a lot of things, and before I play that, it's good to see good news, but let's be honest, it's Trump. Let me just go with that.
Weeks for the former president's media company on the stock market, Trump Media announced today they're jumping into streaming. That didn't help at all. Shares of Truth Social's embattled parent company dropped more than 14% today. Its second consecutive day of double-digit losses. It's now plummeted more than 70% from its all-time high just last month, a plunge President Biden noted on the campaign trail earlier today.
I have to say, if Trump's stock in the Truth Social, his company, drops any lower, he might do better under my tax plan than his.
Boy, did that get a laugh. Joining me now, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist David K. Johnston. He's covered Donald Trump for more than 30 years. All right. So why is the stock dropping so quickly?
Because this company only had $4 million of revenue and it lost $58 million. And Donald has announced he plans to sell millions of additional shares to raise capital. It's called watering the stock. It's like when a bar puts water in the gin bottle.
So who benefits? I mean, can Donald Trump come out of this with a heck of a lot more money and investors get effed over?
Can he come out well? He can't sell his shares. What he can do is pledge them for a loan. So let's say he gets 50% of their value and the stock eventually plummets to zero, which it will in all likelihood. His bank shorts the shares that they can cover from him. When the stock falls, they will get all the money back. And if they loaned him 50% of their value, they double their money minus their costs. And Donald, the loan that he got, it's paid off when the deal is closed. So the only people who are going to lose here are people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who just showed their support for Donald, bought the stock, and are holding on.
So that's the funny part about all this. This was Doritos media group, because keep in mind, a while back, which feels like eons now, Donald Trump was facing a $400 million judgment. However, because whatever magic his lawyers worked, to where the appeals court was able to get it in right before the end of the time period, led to a 175 bond, which Trump was able to do by basically selling stock into Truth Social, then somehow going into Knight Industry Securities, getting the bond from there, and still trying to think that he's winning. So Trump's stock in the media company that is currently being publicly traded right now is falling like rocks. And as the man said, how they're trying to shorten the sales on this screams highway robbery. Because let's be honest, Trump's a con man. Con men always, in the end, never steal from anybody. They just have them willingly give them money with a smiling face. And then the analyst is right. The only people who are going to be mad are the ones that are throwing their support behind Truth Social. Because Donald Trump in anything is a failed businessman. Great con man, give him that. Failed businessman. And you can tell that because outside of his buildings, his actual business holdings, which are just his properties, he has no other legs to stand on. For all those that don't remember, Trump Steaks, Trump Vodka, Trump University, Trump Airlines, I can keep going. Every business venture this man has had, he has lost billions of dollars. And yet, he's supposedly successful, one of the richest men in the world. I thought it was funny to wake up and see that Truth Social is dropping almost to a level to where you know your business is bad when the current president is ripping dad jokes off of you. That's uberly bad, but at the same time, amazingly funny. But again, a little bit of fun news. Here's also a little bit of fun news. It seems that Mike Johnson is having a little bit of a problem. The current Speaker of the House may actually be running on borrowed time because the calls for his removal seem to be growing. And at first was Marjorie Taylor Greene, it was Matt Gaetz, who somehow is still not in jail, and other Republicans are starting to speak more. Now, granted, it's a small number, but keep in mind, we also said that about Kevin McCarthy, when it's like, oh, it's just a small number of Republicans who don't like the fact that he's dealing with Biden, who don't like the fact that he's not, standing up in defiance and things of that nature. Because as Speaker of the House, whether you're on the Democratic or Republican Party, you do have to work with the other side to keep the government running. Mike Johnson understands this, even though he's also extremely theological when it comes to the Bible, but that's not the subject here. But the thing about this is that Republicans, and I've said this before, since they've been sworn to Congress, have not done anything. If you really think about it, if anything, they've actually had history. They removed the first man to ever be, Kevin McCarthy is the first man in history to be removed as Speaker of the House by his own party. Never heard of in 117 different Congresses, this being 118, has never been done before. Mike Johnson might actually be the second time. But what does that say about Republicans, really? That, keep in mind, they had to go through multiple people before they settled on Mike Johnson. Beforehand, Kevin McCarthy tried to get nominated 15 times just to become House Speaker. At the same time, Republicans have shown that yes, we've been sworn to power. Yes, we said we would have things we didn't do. Or I should say, you didn't do anything you say you didn't do. You didn't hold Biden to whatever his spending, because they were shouting out, I'd like to call them the greatest hits. Oh, we have to stop the Democrats spending. We have to stop Joe Biden from weaponizing the DOJ and the FBI. We have to stop all these accusations and investigations into Trump. So out of all that, you didn't hear the fact that we're going to curb spending, actually help the American people who are suffering right now. You heard none of that. So I find it interesting when people go, well, why they get sworn in? Because people bought the lie. Conservatives vote conservatives, even though you really would vote against your own interest. And that's what happened there. And so now we're all stuck with a lame duck Congress. Well, I guess until, Mike Johnson actually gets enough votes to get out of it again, and then history repeats itself, and then we're just stuck until the midterms to actually clean up the House and Senate. But fun times, because unfortunately we can't get rid of Marjorie Taylor Greene, not as fast as I hope. But speaking of GOP idiots, dictator Ron DeSantis has signed an education bill limiting book challenges. What that basically means, guys, is in his own dominion of Florida, keep in mind, this is the same guy that literally and figuratively wanted to, pretty much anything regarding gayness to be banned, not taught about in schools. He wanted to rewrite African American history. He wanted to take on Disney World, but settled, which Disney World actually won. And now, because of CRT, which again he also banned, it's for the simple fact of the matter is just that now he is signing an education bill limiting book challenges. I cannot make this up. He is limiting a bill that's limiting book challenges because of the simple fact of the matter, he can't explain it really and truly, because the books that are being banned, by the way, which again I still find interesting, is that well, for lack of better words, they don't want to hear about it. It's almost as if it really and truly is almost as if they want to basically want to open and shut the case, and at the same time, guys, want to not really hear anything about it. And that's how DeSantis likes it. DeSantis literally and figuratively likes the fact that he can dictate things as he sees fit, and at the same time, doesn't want to be challenged, because God only knows that books that are literally written by people of color, LGBTQ plus people, they simply do not want them to be out there. And I just wonder that, because I say it on my other podcasts as well, that literally and figuratively, read the banned books above all else. Always read the banned books. And at the same time, only in Florida and other places, mind you, that they're trying to do it, but Florida is taking it one step farther and making sure that you can't even challenge it. But again, it's Governor Dictator Ron DeSantis. Why should we be surprised? But speaking of surprises, Israel, who is still locked in their war with Hamas. I have to give President Biden credit, because what he is going to do, what he has said, or I should say what's going to be said, makes the next steps of the war very interesting.
With the Biden administration certainly walking a fine line as it tries to de-escalate tensions in the Middle East.
Yeah, Lindsay, well, the White House says that what comes next, whether or not to respond, is ultimately up to Israel, while also urging restraint. The president, we've learned, encouraged Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to slow things down, to think carefully and strategically about the risk of escalation. The White House, trying to do everything it can to prevent this from spiraling into a wider war, is arguing that this was a spectacular success for Israel, a major victory, suggesting that additional retaliation may not be necessary. Now, the president spent the weekend fully engaged on this, monitoring the attack in real time from the Situation Room, reaching out to allies and partners in the region. And while he is underscoring that the U.S. has full and total support for Israel, the White House also says that the U.S. will not participate in any retaliatory counterstrike against Iran, Lindsay.
Yeah, the White House.
Now that's interesting, because Netanyahu, who again, I like to call him the welfare queen, is steady more going on the attack, because, well, he believes that Hamas needs to be destroyed. I have sit there and said multiple times, why are we still supporting this? Even more so that now Biden is saying, well, if you decide to attack Gaza, if you decide to attack Gaza and Hamas, if you decide to do this, you're retaliating on your own. Now, we already know Netanyahu is not going to do spit without U.S. assistance. But I have been saying this the entire time. If we wanted Netanyahu to stop his attack against Hamas and innocent people being hurt and killed, all the U.S. had to do, cut off Israel. That's it. Cut them off. Cut off their funding. Cut off whatever support we give them. Simply put, cut them off, because Israel by itself wouldn't last too long without us. At the same time, we have seen so many calls for ceasefires, calls to stand up against Israel, because again, anything pro-Palestinian, as you guys have noticed, gets cut off. Don't believe me? There was a valedictorian, top of her class at USC, who is pro-Palestinian. I'm guessing you wonder where I'm going with this, if you haven't already figured that out already. Her valedictorian speech has been canceled. I wonder why.
Presented a serious challenge for colleges. We've seen it all across the country. Now USC is not allowing its valedictorian, who's publicly supported Palestinians, to give a speech at next month's commencement, citing security concerns. It is a decision that has been praised by several pro-Israel groups, but criticized by the country's largest Muslim civil rights organization. The student at the center of this controversy joins us now, Asna Tabassum. Asna, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. I want to start with this statement that the college provost said, in part, that the intensity of the feelings around allowing you to speak, quote, escalated to the point of creating substantial risk relating to security and disruption at the commencement, pointing out harassment and violence seen on other campuses. But, you know, I know you had a meeting with them. I'm wondering, did they tell you anything specific, a specific threat that was made against you, or have you had any specific threats made against you?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I will have to say, no, nothing specific was, offered to me. No specific details regarding security threats or safety concerns were offered to me.
So a lot of people, and you kind of, talk about this a little bit, but a lot of people, the criticism of you, your classmates, some of them feel like that this goes back to a link. You've talked about this. It's posted on social media to a site there. Another person created this, we should point out. You did not create it. You posted it to a site. Some believe it contains anti-Semitic views, really some vile anti-Semitic views, including calling for the abolishment of the state of Israel. So do you think that's part of it? And do you believe the state of Israel should be abolished?
So when it comes to abolishing the state of Israel, I do want to point out the rest of the link. And so the very next sentence talks about the peaceful coexistence of Arabs and Jews. And I think it points to what I've been saying since the beginning of this issue, which is that I'm committed to human equality and to human rights. And so this link, I encourage people to look at it in its entirety rather than looking at one specific example. For example, it's discussing both the one state and the two state solution. It's discussing the history of the region. And I think that there's important information for people to understand on their own and come to their own conclusions about. When it comes to abolishing the state of Israel, I will say I want to abolish apartheid.
If there is one state and two state in there, you could see a two-state solution. I think the abolishment of Israel is what bothered a lot of people, but you would advocate for a two-state solution so Israel would still exist and then there would be a Palestinian state. Is that what I'm hearing?
So no, I'm not necessarily committing to a one state or a two state solution. I'm simply saying that this information on the website offered information from multiple perspectives. And so my endorsing of any one single perspective is unfounded.
Okay, so USC has said this is not meant to infringe upon your free speech. Do you feel like it's doing just that?
So in its most technical terms, the ability to give a speech at commencement is a privilege, right? It's not necessarily free speech. But what I will say that, I expressed my views and I expressed my views online, and the hatred that was leveled at me because of myself expressing these views, I think ultimately was part of the reason why USC caved in. And so whether free speech in its most technical terms is being debated here is maybe up for debate, but I will say speech is an issue and speech is being stifled.
What were you going to speak about? I mean, there's a lot of talk about what you posted, that link, and what your beliefs may be. Were you going to talk about that at graduation, or were you going to give a different kind of speech?
So the valedictorian honor is ultimately a unifying honor, right? It's emblematic of USC's unifying values. And I think I take that to heart. I wanted my speech to be in the genre of a valedictory speech. And so that being said, I wanted to impart a message of hope. I also wanted to impart a message of responsibility, right? We are given a wonderful set of higher education. We have been given the knowledge of learning how to learn. And so I wanted to encourage my peers to, learn about the world and come to their own conclusions and then act to change the world in the ways that they see fit. And so ultimately, taking in my role as valedictorian, I wanted to be a unifying voice for all students, and that was preemptively taken away from me.
All right, Asna, thanks so much.
So, yeah, imagine, now keep in mind, guys, for all those that have been valedictorians, I mean, I was almost one, but I got screwed, but that's neither here nor there. But yes, the fact that she was graduating, right, that Asna Tabassum, and forgive me if I mispronounce your name, that she was literally about to give her speech. Now, for all those that have been valedictorians, you already know you have to submit your speech. It has to get checked to make sure you don't upset people, I guess. which I've never understood for us to be in the world of free speech, that we're telling our next generations that graduate that, hey, we actually need to, censor you before we can allow you to speak. Because God only knows what happens when you let them actually go full throttle, which you actually should. But again, that's neither here nor there. But they said safety concerns. Really? So you're a valedictorian, which, by the way, is not easy to do, especially at USC. But the valedictorian at USC is pro-Palestinian, was going to give her speech, and because she's pro-Palestinian, her speech got canceled. I can only imagine if she was pro-Israel, she would probably get the red carpet treatment. Because, look, no matter how you side on this, no matter how you side on the subject of the Israel-Hamas war, no matter how you side on it, you should be allowed to speak. Now, it amazes me so because I remember a time in college when I was reading through the history books, there's this little thing called Vietnam. And what happened in Vietnam was a tragedy. At the same time, you had certain individuals around college campuses protesting against the war, protesting against the fact of sending young men to die, protesting about the fact that America was overreaching. And I don't remember anybody getting, told not to speak or canceled. Now, is this a tragedy that she will never get to, give her speech? Yes, because I want to hear what she has to say. Because it's amazing anytime someone says a pro-Palestinian, oh, you're anti-Semitic, oh, you're this, you're that. Might want to hear them out first because, again, I keep pointing this out, especially in my progressively backwards home state of Tennessee, specifically Nashville, where we covered almost 3 months ago. Well, I want to say 2 months ago. We covered a group of people dressed up as Nazis strolling through downtown Nashville. And they got through downtown Nashville unscathed, untouched, because, well, they didn't actually go to Jackson Street, because if they went to Jackson Street, they would never made it back. But the point I'm making out of all this is, if relics of the past and people who follow a racist regime can sit there and protest in areas to where if World War II and World War I veterans saw this, would lose their freaking minds. But they got through unscathed. They were able to exercise their right to free speech. You're telling me an individual who's graduating as valedictorian of a prestigious college cannot give her speech because you're afraid of what will be said? Exactly what? That Israel may be a dictator state, that Israel may have actually done some horrendous things historically, that Israel really wasn't recognized as a country until 1709 or somewhere close to that date. What is so bad that she would have said that USC said we cannot take this risk? Because that's the question I would ask. What is so bad in her speech that what she would have said would have caused such an uproar and blowback? Because, again, Republicans do it on a daily basis and without zero consequence. You're telling me one graduating college student can't express herself, but yet we talk about the fact that free speech is everywhere? Says a lot. All I'm saying, it says a lot. But speaking of things that say a lot, if you know the story about Ricky Cobb II and the fact that this man, again, another example of a traffic stop gone horribly, horribly wrong, again, echoes what I've always said about law enforcement, now going on almost 3 years.
So a Minnesota state trooper is being charged in connection with the deadly shooting of a black man during a traffic stop. State officials say that after months of reviewing this case, they are charging Ryan Lundgren with multiple charges, including second-degree murder for the shooting that killed Ricky Cobb II. Our Alex Perez is following the story for us. It's new this hour. So, Alex, what are you learning?
Yeah, Kara, that trooper has also been charged with second-degree manslaughter and first-degree assault. Now, let's refresh our memories on this case. This all unfolded back July 31st of 2023, the early morning hours. Troopers say they initially pulled Cobb over because his taillights were out. But once they ran his information, they determined that a neighboring county was actually looking to speak with him on an accusation that he violated a domestic order of protection. Things then escalated when Cobb was asked to step out of the car, and he refused to do so. Eventually, he was shot by that trooper and he died. Now, authorities have been investigating this for several months, and these are the charges that the family has been calling for since this shooting occurred. Now, in a statement, an attorney for the trooper says that the county attorney there in Hennepin County, Minneapolis, is out of control. That is the quote from the attorney for the trooper. And then their own statement, the family of Ricky Cobb says that these charges are the first step towards closure and justice. If convicted, Kira, this trooper could face 10 to 15 years behind bars. Kira?
So the question I got out of all this is, and I say this all the time, that and again, it never ceases to amaze me about law enforcement. I hate to sound like a broken record, but I gotta call it what it is. Cops can get away with everything, including shooting a black man on a traffic stop, because there have not been enough examples of cops going and doing real time outside of 10 to 15 years. So you're telling me you kill a black man and you're sitting in jail for 10, maybe 7 years, if you get off for good behavior, but 10 to 15 years? On top of that, cops don't know how to de-escalate things. And again, I will still sit here and say this, that there needs to be a redevelopment in law enforcement. There needs to be retraining. There needs to be tighter qualification. There needs to be a filtering process. Because again, how many times have we seen a traffic stop go horribly, horribly, horribly wrong that did not need to? Especially in this case where the officer here, the state trooper here, I should say, took it one step farther to the point to where a black man's life ended. How many times do we keep hearing the same situation, but it's a different life being taken? At the same time, even though the trooper is on trial, but at the same time, the most he could probably get is 10 to 15 years. I keep saying this. You want to stop certain things? Because what usually happens, the cop may or may not get off, depending on the jury. The cop then gets sued for wrongful death by the family. And again, a settlement's done. That's usually the revolving clock that usually happens. But here's the thing I point out, and I've pointed this out before. I'm not the only one that has done this. Killer Mike has said this as well as countless others. If you want something to stop, attack the money. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The police pension fund should be used to pay out to the victims of these officers. So anytime these officers have killed someone in line of duty in cold blood, or just off the fact that they just reached for the gun first, then their pension should pay out to the families. Watch how quickly shootings stop. Watch how quickly failed traffic stops. Watch how that quickly stops. Because when your pension is paying out to these families and you're watching that money go by, oh, you bet your butt things change very quickly. But I've also sat there and said that law enforcement has to be reformed. But thanks to a certain senator who tried to be a president, who is now, Sambo shooting his way to trying to be Trump's VP, but we'll get to him momentarily. But yes, he was the reason why the George Floyd police reform bill was killed. But again, I really hate to keep saying this, that every time we see a failed traffic stop, and law enforcement, again, will refuse to call it their own, and yet they wonder why people of color will never trust law enforcement. They keep wondering, and we keep seeing examples of why. But again, you train longer to be a plumber, a contractor, electrician, or a nail technician than you do for a police officer. Again, call me I'm wrong, but like I said, 6 months or less in the academy, and you're right there out there protecting and screwing up. Just saying. But moving right along, guys, I wanted to cover this story as well because Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Jesus, I never thought I'd say that name. I never thought I'd say that name in that sentence in that entire order. Keep in mind, she has pushed forward in her state of Arkansas the LEARNS Act, which is the Literacy, Empowerment, Accountability, Readiness, Networking, and Safety School Act, which is intended to prohibit public schools from teaching diversity, equity, and inclusion, and critical race theory. Again, the whole idea of this is that those of the LEARNS Act believe that DEI, critical race theory, which again is not being taught anywhere outside of a law school, they see these things as indoctrination. I see this as attacking your education. Well, Huckabee was the first governor to actually institute this type of act, and the NAACP are actually filing a lawsuit against the Learns Act, against the state of Arkansas for the Learns Act, and requesting an injunction to prevent it from being enforced as the lawsuit is being litigated. I have been saying this once, I've been saying this once again, it needs to be fought. Because again, it seems like all these things these days are being fought in court anyway. But yes, education is a big one. Education is such a big one that it needs to be fought. Because when critical race theory first came out, nobody knew who it was. Nobody knew what it was. But all you heard was they're gonna make white people feel bad about the fact that they're actually looking at history under a magnifying glass. Oh, so you mean the thing they should be doing in school, but really they're getting a watered down version of it? Yeah. Oh, we can't let our future generations know that our previous heritage has been messing up this entire time. We must keep this indoctrination out. And indoctrination was a word that just, it's a buzzword that people stick on. We can't let our kids be indoctrinated. This is coming from pro-Christians who have no problem sending their children to theological schools, but apparently have an issue with drag queens reading to them. But you want to talk about indoctrination. Right. But again, I'm not mad about the NAACP filing this injunction, even going at this, because education as a whole is being attacked everywhere. I mean, think about it. Teachers are getting paid less. School systems are getting squeezed out. Education budgets are being cut in half and then half and then half again. At the same time, you have, overcrowded schools. Education hasn't changed since the 80s. Testing has now become the standard for most areas because they are basically set up systems to doomed to fail. So I can't knock the fact that, education is definitely in danger. But just like with the GOP, if they want something that bad enough, they will drive it into the ground and say it's the other person's fault in order to privatize it. It's only a matter of time before they try to do the same in education, especially here in the South. But again, I digress, as we will sit there and wait to see what happens from that lawsuit. RFK Jr. Has ruled out his libertarian run as president. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Again, we covered him. This is the same man that went on CNN and sat there and said that the current president is a bigger threat than Trump ever was because Biden is weaponizing the DEA. He is weaponizing the FBI and the DOJ. Yeah, it's kind of crazy how a man that sounds like he needs a throat lozenge every 5 seconds is going to sit there and say that he's basically being prevented from speaking because the current president says so. And he wonders why he never got any traction. Well, fortunately, RFK, thanks for coming. Thank God you're not getting any farther. I'm just saying. But speaking of my home state of Tennessee, and I keep pointing this out as well. See, in Tennessee, guys, especially Chattanooga, is the Volkswagen plant. Volkswagen, that plant has been there since, dear God, going on almost 40 years. Anyway, you're probably wondering, why am I bringing up the Volkswagen, the Chattanooga Volkswagen Tennessee factory? Well, because what's actually happening now, if you haven't noticed, unions are becoming a thing, as they should. You should unionize in your area or your location or your profession if you have it. If you have one, I highly recommend it. If you don't have one, start one. Because again, negotiating on your own against the corporations and companies never works out well. But unions will always hold people accountable. And again, we have seen the union strikes that have happened, especially in the most recent months. And the fact of the matter is, those unions have won. Why is this a problem? Because unionization is trying to happen in Volkswagen's Tennessee factory, and good old douchey Governor Bill Lee and 5 other governors are telling workers that voting for a union will put jobs in jeopardy. How else can you scream union intimidation tactics? Because what they're saying is that as of today, 4,300 workers at the plant Chattanooga will be voting to see about wanting to join the United Workers Auto Union. That'll be done by it'll be tallied by the National Rights and Labor Board, Labor Relations Board. I apologize. So the UAW has been trying to get a chapter in Volkswagen for some time. They're voting to do that, and it's amazing to me that our governor Governor Bill Lee, which I didn't vote for him because plainly he's an idiot, and others are saying that they work too hard to bring good paying jobs to their states. Well, yes, because you bent over backwards and gave tax breaks to all of these great companies. You gave it to Ford, who was going to basically set up in a mostly black town that was near Jackson, Tennessee, that decided they needed to take it over because Ford's new manufacturing plant was going to be put there. However, it's amazing now that, beforehand, they can care less about you. But they're trying to say that unionization, and this is the part that kills me, they're trying to say that a unionization will stop growth in its tracks. Where in history has unionization ever stopped progress? Because that's what they're trying to see. Because quote unquote, Governor Bill Lee is saying, we are seeing the fallout of the Detroit 3 strikes with those automakers rethinking investments and cutting jobs. Putting businesses in our states in that position is the last thing we want to do. He's not saying what he should be saying about the Detroit 3. He's not saying what Ford and Stellantis and GM have done, because nobody complains about the profits that these three big automakers have done. But the fact of the matter is, the workers, also the UAW, did go on strike. And yes, what those big three tried to do was cut jobs in retaliation. And at the same time, the UAW stood there and said, okay, we're going to strike at the most important sites and get your attention for losing money. Because keep in mind, those workers at those big three did get raises, did get more benefits, did actually get more improved working conditions in their favor, all because of unions. So again, it is amazing to me that Bill Lee is going to sit there and say that, well, they were rethinking investments and cutting jobs. Where were the big three going to go? Because, yeah, you can go to Mexico. Yeah, you can go overseas. But do you really want to cut the American workers' legs out from under them and then expect them to buy the very same vehicles you want to bring back into the States? Good luck with that. At the same time, Ford, GM, and Stellantis all saw the light. They went ahead and paid them. Now imagine what would have happened if they just went ahead and paid them from Front Street. If they paid them from Front Street, this would be the end of it. So again, that being in Chattanooga, this being in the South, this being that Governor Bill Lee is trying his hardest, along with other governors, to basically do union intimidation tactics, union busting, if you will. And again, I'm saying best. I am hoping that those 4,300 workers at the Volkswagen plant in Chattanooga do the right thing, unionize, because you should. Unions work. It's been a proven track record, and again, you cannot trust corporations to basically negotiate on your own, because they will look you over, but they cannot look over people when you're actually voting and working in numbers. Again, unions work. But speaking of things that don't work, Tim Scott, America's favorite Uncle Tom, is still somehow believing that he might be Trump's VP pick. Even more so that he is basically trying to make himself the face of the Black conservative movement. Guys, I cannot make this up because, and again, I point this out because it needs to be pointed out. Black conservatives, I'm not saying you don't exist. I've said many times on the show, I am certain there are Black conservatives out there, maybe some intelligent ones, maybe ones that just watch Fox News repeat everything, or like Candace Owens, you're basically gearing up trying to get a paycheck by just being their Sambo. But the thing about Tim Scott, outside of the fact that he has done nothing, outside of the fact that he is a failed presidential candidate, outside of the fact that, he didn't really have plans put in place. He was basically being the only Black person on an all-white party doesn't scream well for you. At the same time, sounding like Fox News 24/7 doesn't help you either. So in this case, he has decided now that he's going to be the face of Black conservatives. And Black conservatives, if you ever do come across my podcast, I want to know, do you really think Tim Scott's an idiot, or do you think he's the next, or you think he's the second coming? Because he is launching, as far as reaching Black voters from a conservative side, he is launching a series called America Starting 5, with other Black Republicans in Congress in order to reach Black conservatives more and also to reach more Black voters as they will discuss politics, race, and the 2024 election. Are you freaking kidding me? I kind of want to watch one episode of this because I want to sit there and come back to you guys and say it's exactly what I thought it was. It's pandering to the most. You know, it's basically putting Black people in front of white people and saying, hey, racist white people, you can feel comfortable because we think and act just like you. I'm just saying, I would be curious to see it. I think I will actually find out about when that plays because, again, with Tim Scott, he is pandering for a job. That is it. And some people would sit there and say, well, yes, you could have a Black VP. You could also have a woman VP. Trump, if he somehow stays out of jail so in order to receive the nomination for president, I mean, it is possible. But again, Tim Scott is doing what he does best, trying to secure the next bag. And VP looks good. At least he thinks it looks good. I think he needs to learn a lesson from Planet Owens, though, because Planet ain't got a job no more. But, you know, again, what ifs. But before we get to our feel-good news segment, guys, I worry about the two things here. Number one, the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is still overly conservative because, again, we have seen the decisions that a conservative Supreme Court has done. You've killed Roe versus Wade. You have killed a part of affirmative action regarding college interests because 4 Asians decided to go after Harvard and say Harvard denied them because they were Asian, and yet completely killed DEI everywhere. By the way, those 4 Asian students still didn't get into Harvard. But again, this is all with a conservative-leaning Supreme Court. Now, when you think of the idea of homelessness, of course, it is tragic. It is terrible. It could be prevented. It could be helped. But now that case is going to be picked up by the Supreme Court. Again, my caution level is pretty freaking high.
Sprawling encampments of unhoused people dotting many of the country's biggest cities are ubiquitous reminders of homelessness here in America. But now, a growing number of communities are taking what's being seen as punitive approach to clear them out, making it a crime in some places to sleep outside, even when some say they have nowhere else to go. So is it cruel and unusual punishment? The Supreme Court will tackle that question next week. And Devin Dwyer reports for us from Grants Pass, Oregon, about what's at stake.
On the banks of the Rogue River, tucked away under trees on the side of the road, even in center field of the local Little League ballpark, the homelessness epidemic is inescapable, even in sleepy Grants Pass, Oregon. Population 40,000, roughly 600 call parks like this one home. Brandon, a 38-year-old Grants Pass native, says he has no choice.
So the city came in and said you can't camp right there on those wood chips.
The officer said I was too close to the playground and I was too close to the fence.
Local law requires that he move his camp every 72 hours. The city had tried to ban camping in parks outright, but was blocked by a federal court for now.
If I don't feel like I belong, I'm going to feel like an outsider, and then I'm going to want to continue doing the same thing because there's no reason to thrive for anything different.
There's no place to go.
Helen Cruz knows the indignity firsthand. Over 5 years living in parks before a nearby church took her in, she says she received more than $5,000 in camping-related fines.
I was holding down 2 jobs when I was out here, and still not enough to be able to rent a place. Their terms of low-income housing here is $1,000 a month, and that's not workable either, you know.
So when the police come through and they do a sweep of this area, what do they do? What do they tell you?
If you don't comply, you are trespassed and you could possibly go to jail.
The city of Grants Pass is among a growing number of American communities passing laws to crack down on homeless encampments. A perfect storm of skyrocketing housing prices, sunsetting COVID relief programs, a mental health and drug abuse crisis, and an aging population without retirement savings has led to record numbers of unhoused people nationwide.
For all intents and purposes, a lot of the behavior you see here today is illegal. And then our community will ask, well, what are you doing about it, Chief?
Chief Warren Hensman says his officers are caught in the middle.
We have community members in Grants Pass that are afraid to come to their parks. We've had shootings in our parks. We've had fights in our parks, chronic drug abuse in our parks. So much of our citizenry are not walking through our parks.
In 2013, the city passed an ordinance banning anyone from using a blanket, pillow, or cardboard box for protection from the elements while sleeping in public. Local Representative Dwayne Yunker says it was intended to crack down on unsanitary conditions and crime.
Critics of Grants Pass say the council has tried to criminalize homelessness. Is that what's going on here?
We do have a responsibility to keep people safe. And that's the struggle, is how do we keep everybody safe? Is it safe to have a kid play in the park where there's a tent 20 feet away? I don't know what the people in the tent are doing.
But with no public shelters inside city limits, a group of homeless residents alleged the new law was cruel and unusual punishment. They sued in federal court and won.
We're fighting between what the law is telling us and what the people want us to do and trying to make everybody happy. That's a big, huge struggle for us, the city government.
Criminalizing the victims of our failed housing policy is morally wrong and it's unconstitutional. And that's essentially what the city of Grants Pass has done by making it illegal for someone to exist while being homeless.
I had a beautiful vegetable garden. I love to cook.
Laura, a 55-year-old Grants Pass native and mother of 3, says homelessness hit suddenly after her husband died in 2021 and health problems sent her to the hospital.
Have you been ticketed by the city?
Yeah. I have over a dozen citations.
And what are the citations for?
Mostly for scattering rubbish. And that means that anything outside of your 8 foot by 8 foot diameter limits is considered rubbish, trash.
Her home is now a tent in this park.
I needed a little bit of color out here.
A single daffodil, one small sign. Laura is clinging to hope.
There's those of us that are struggling and fighting and taking one step out as we're digging out of the hole.
You have nowhere else to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But across the river,
You've got 78 beds in this building. It's only half full. Why is that?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. So this is what we call our 30-day dorm.
Brian Boteller says the doors are open at the only private homeless shelter in town, the Grants Pass Gospel Rescue Mission. For over 40 years, it's provided warm beds and meals, but with religious requirements.
How many times a day do they go to chapel?
Twice a day, our guys go to chapel. They go to chapel once in the morning, once in the evening.
The Lord said, learn a lesson from this unjust judge.
Residents must also quit smoking, drinking, and drug use and give up their pets.
The Ninth Circuit said that it's cruel and unusual punishment on the part of Grants Pass to cite and fine some homeless folks for living in the park when there's nowhere else to go.
Well, that's the big question. Is there nowhere else to go? Is there just nowhere else that they want to go?
Boteller says so long as courts say Grants Pass cannot ban camping in public, more people will choose to stay on the streets.
We've seen a drop in our residency, and we've seen an increase in people in our parks and freeway underpasses and that kind of stuff in places where they ought not be.
Cities from Phoenix to Los Angeles to Seattle have joined Grants Pass in appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court.
These encampments in California are unacceptable.
Elected officials from both parties urging the justices to make it easier for cities to clear tent encampments like these.
It's not acceptable for anyone to call the streets or a park their home, and cities need to have these ordinances so that they can help to incentivize people to accept offers of help. That's what these laws do.
The reality is the only thing that works is more permanent, affordable housing. This case is not going to solve homelessness. If we prevail in this case, our homeless problem is still going to be there. It just means that we can't criminalize people while they're homeless.
For Helen Cruz and Brandon, a lot is on the line.
We're just a small little community with a really big homeless problem and no place to put us.
Yeah. So what's crazy about that is that America does have a homeless problem, but it's not like we run out of space. It's the fact that our housing, as far as our housing goes, and this is what I think is crazy. Imagine the fact that you're trying to buy a house now in 2024. I've been told in my home state of Tennessee, you have to make at least $175,000 to qualify for a house. Think about that. When the average median income, especially in Tennessee, is somewhere hovering between $42,000 to $45,000 a year, and yet you have a better chance of getting an apartment, which, by the way, apartment rent has skyrocketed to $25,000 and up for a one bedroom. So if you're making under $50,000 a year, let's just use it as a ceiling, and your rent, getting a car, gas, food, utilities, things of that nature, all of that, mind you, your side doesn't go a long way, and that's just apartments. We're not talking about homes. Homes that are either getting demolished and new apartments are getting put up with New York rent because those with remote jobs are moving here because, again, if you're making $180,000 and up, then or if you're making $180,000 up and you're single, then hey, Nashville's going to be your oyster. But at the same time, for the rest of us who don't have that income, bump an apartment, renting a home or an apartment seems to be the best case scenario. Trying to go for a home is almost impossible. But that's not just Tennessee. It's everywhere. That the American dream of owning a home gets harder and harder and harder to achieve. So you're stuck renting. But even that has its finite. But again, you have those who would love to have home, who would love to be have a roof over their heads. But because of the way things are going, they rather prefer sleep on the street. And then you have ordinances out there by certain cities and states that are trying to remove people because they're eyesores, at least the way they look at it, eyesores to everybody else. So what's the solution? I mean, you could really try to revamp the way we do affordable housing in America. You could revamp more funding to go into helping fight homelessness. You can go into more funding as to opening up more shelters and things of that nature for men and women and children. We could do those things. But instead, we're going to leave it in the hands of a conservative Supreme Court, which, again, makes me very nervous because that Supreme Court is liable to rule against it. And again, the homeless population is only increasing because everything is going up at your paycheck. But unless you're Ukraine or Israel or Taiwan, you're not getting the relief that Americans should be getting. So again, forgive me if I say this, I'm a little nervous to see what the Supreme Court would do in that situation regarding homelessness. But we're going to go ahead and move on to our feel-good segment, guys, because you don't have the Frack We Got Here. We do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes they can use your faith in humanity, but hey, it's Wednesday. Tomorrow is Friday Eve, which is Thursday. We leave you guys out with some good vibrations, some positive notes. And whenever I see stories like this makes me think the next generation might actually save us all.
Watching my son go through the Disney Dream Academy has been amazing. It's like a little fire has been ignited in him. When Telerio started his mushroom farm, he was about 7 years old. And when he was selling mushrooms at the farmer's market, he found out that some people didn't have enough money to buy the food that they needed. And so he was very passionate about trying to help them. And so he started a little backyard garden and he wanted to do more. And that's how the nonprofit started. The community has been amazing helping him. Someone donated an acre of land to him so he can have his urban farm. So he's received grants and people come and volunteer and help him harvest, help him weed. And so hopefully, he'll be able to, do more of that and spread the kindness and let other people know that, everyone can make a small difference where they are.
I want you to be better than me. I wanted to give you a little opportunity to come with me to Shark Tank.
Okay,
Yeah?
cool.
You gonna be available?
I am 100%.
I didn't tell you when it is.
I'll be available anytime. That was a big surprise. That one got me extremely excited for that opportunity. I'm very amazed and I'm very happy.
And now, he's becoming a young man and making his own decisions, and he has his own passions. And I'm just there beside him, just pushing him, encouraging him, and there to help just lift him up.
And again, I love seeing stories like that because I keep saying, guys, when it comes to the youth, encourage them, no matter how big their ambitions are, how big their dreams are, encourage them because they will do wonders. And whenever I see stories like that, young man, Mr. Tolero Watkins, we gonna be all right. Y'all, the next generation just might get it right. But anyway, that's gonna do it for this podcast, guys. I thank you all for liking, for watching, for letting people know this is live. I do thank you very much because, like I said, I can never do this without any of you guys' support. So definitely thank you for that. Some shameless plugging before we get out of here, guys. Shout out to my boy Vaughn at Big VZA. Definitely check him out. Big VZA on all social media. Also, check out blurrstation.com. I keep telling you guys, this is the new wave. This is actually how we build our table as our next. This is actually our bastion of new media for television shows, for movies, for comics, for animation. You can pretty much find it here at blurrstation.com. Definitely go to blurrstation.com. You can join right now, as you can see right up here. The only thing that I ask, guys, is that you'll select the Blurred IU Affinity membership there for $10.99. Select any member there, including myself, Black Spartan. We would all appreciate it. Again, it's $10.99 a month, guys. $10.99 a month to view Blur Station. You can't beat that with a stick. Of course, after 36 months of paying $10.99 a month, you will get the opportunity to own a piece of Blur Station. Again, if you ever want to own a piece of a media like Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, and not paying an asshole amount of money through a trading conglomerate, it's a lot easier with Blur Station. I promise you. At the same time, guys, again, this is how we do it. The same way that we turned Tubi into a joke of a network that's now well over 200 million, we do the same thing here. So content creators, you can definitely do that at Blur Station too. Just join up first, and then you'll be able to pitch your idea to Blur Station. And if selected, you can be on it. And again, you have the rights to all your own content. The only thing they want is a piece of the distribution, and that right there screams volumes to me. But aside from that, guys, you can usually find me Black_Spartan615 on the socials. I do reviews on everything. The link at the bottom, make that a little bit bigger for everybody to see. If you copy and paste that link onto your browser, it'll take you to my link tree. That's the YouTube and Facebook groups for all of my podcasts. How the Frack We Got Here, get bit off of this podcast. Again, like, share, subscribe, hit the notifications button. Like PBS says, I know I sound very corny when I say this, but it's true. We cannot do any of this without you. So again, like, share, and follows are free. Only take a second to do. And again, word of mouth is how we get this out, guys. And like I said, the whole idea of this podcast is empowering you to get to know what's going on in your city, your state, not just the national level, but the local level. The local level matters just as much as the national. And trust me, if you're in the home state of Tennessee right now, thank you. Shout out to the Tennessee Holler. They're letting people know that come election time, we need to vote some idiots out of the Tennessee legislature. That's all I'm saying. But the last thing I'll say, guys, about how the Frack We Got Here, again, is all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind, but we do provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do a lot of things when we're progressive. We move forward. We try to right our wrongs by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like electing our first Black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first Black woman to be a national cybersecurity director. All great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's what we keep asking ourselves. Why does everything go up by our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians to still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack We Got Here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other. And I promise you, somehow, we'll all get through this. Peace.